Angela and her father can be found at the Moree swimming pool every day. As the Olympic team selections move closer, Angela is also competing in a hectic schedule of swimming meets to bring up her times on both the 50 and 100 metres freestyle. She says despite winning both events at the country championships in Canberra, her times are still slower than what she hopes to race in April. This weekend, she'll be swimming against the likes of Lisa Curry-Kenny at the Queensland titles, and to make the Olympic team, Angela needs to do well.
It's going to be very tough. This year's probably going to be the fastest sprint freestyle field that Australia's ever seen. It's going to be very tough to get in the first four for the relay, but I'm hoping to make it.
Angela says whatever swimming team is chosen for Barcelona, they'll bring home gold.
Really, really well. I think there's a chance of quite a few gold over there, and if not silver and bronze, but I think it'll be the best result Australia's ever had.
Moree Council has a list of about 30 ratepayers with overdue excess water rate bills. Because of the cost of taking them through the court system to have the water cut off, the council is installing water restrictions.
Well, they're basically a restrictor for water flow. They cut the water flow down from approximately 5,000 litres an hour to around about 5 litres every 10 minutes. And it restricts the use of the water through the meter.
What it means to the ratepayer in practical terms is that life might not quite be so comfortable over the hot summer months.
It means that they won't have enough water to operate sprinklers for their gardens, and basically showers will be a dribble. It'll meet health requirements for filling cisterns in toilets and washing hands, but that's basically all it'll meet.
Moree Council is the first in the northwest to use the system, but councils on the Central Coast have had success with restrictions. They've found the $30 cost of installing the device has had ratepayers suddenly finding the cash to pay outstanding water bills.
Australian poultry processors have been working under strict quarantine regulations for the last 40 years, maintaining a strong international reputation and giving the local customers the highest quality product. The Australian Quarantine Inspection Service is studying import applications from New Zealand, Denmark, Thailand and the US, but the local industry says it's playing a dangerous game.
There is a chance, a risk of bringing an exotic disease into Australia. That's a disease of poultry that we don't have in the country.
Diseases such as Newcastle disease and avian influenza offered a major food poisoning risk and also threatened to decimate the entire chicken breeding industry. Jobs too would go. It's estimated 9,000 people across the country could face the axe.
It's just not a level playing field that people talk about these days. I mean, the international industry is massively subsidised.
Like Aussie wheat farmers, chicken farmers would have to compete with nations which are backed by government grants. The Quarantine Inspection Service will finish its study in the next few months. A federal government directive is expected soon after. Peter Ryan, NBN News.
Police have so far failed to uncover any signs of the vehicle and no more calls have been picked up. Police say they are carrying out an extensive search of the area through rugged terrain, but haven't ruled out the possibility the call was a hoax.
There's not been any trauma associated with the roadway, which would indicate that a vehicle has collided with a tree nearby. It was suggested by the caller that he did so in trying to avoid kangaroos. But the fences are all intact and the country is such that it's open adjacent to the roads, and we feel that clearly if anybody were there in difficulty they would have been observed before this.
Last night, State Emergency Service members and police from Narrabri and Boggabri started to search the area where the call is believed to have originated from, but so far they've found nothing. An ultralight aircraft was called in this afternoon to join the search.
They're away and racing in the do's and don'ts on being a BMX star. 17-year-old state champion and head instructor Wade Boots was impressed with the talent.
Yeah, there's some little 7-year-olds and 6-year-olds. They're going to be champions when they're older.
The young riders paid a set fee for a day of instruction ranging from tips on diet and exercise to track skills. The trick is to hit with a surge of power over a 40-second race. But when they get into the big time, Mum and Dad will be hoping for some team sponsors. A good bike can cost more than $1,500.
For half a century or more, young people looking for a trade on the railways have trained at the Cardiff workshops. In recent years, State Rail has employed about 15 annually for training in Newcastle. But this year there'll be no apprentices taken on locally, and that's how it's likely to stay.
The reason for that is that our Cardiff Training Centre, along with the workshop, is phasing out. It'll be out of action in a maximum of 2 years' time.
But the Federation of Industrial, Manufacturing and Engineering Employees has slammed the decision to cut training in Newcastle as lacking in foresight.
We have excellent training facilities in the Newcastle area for training apprentices. We feel that in a downturn such as this, it is an ideal opportunity for apprentices to be trained, and hopefully with the upturn in the economy over the next 3 to 4 years, there'd be a need for skilled labour.
The union says it's pushing for State Rail to take on more apprentices, but management says the demand is simply not there and qualified tradesmen are having to work as labourers.
I started off 85, I think, as a fitter, and 4 years later I was put back to a labourer.
Right now we have a situation where the workload is decreasing faster than the opportunities we have to absorb apprentices into the workforce.
All State Rail apprenticeship training will now be in Sydney, but this year's intake has been slashed from 200 to 58. Scott Bevan, NBN News. Gordon Pacific announced last October that its vision of a residential and tourist resort at Caves Beach would begin to take shape this month. Even though the company had posted an $18 million loss to the end of last June, Executive Chairman Noel Gordon was then confident that the organisation and the development starting time were on cue.
I think it all goes well for the future with an asset that we have here at Caves Beach.
But Gordon Pacific has now suspended itself from the stock exchange. The company cites as one reason for the suspension that it's waiting to finalise suitable funding for joint ventures. With Gordon Pacific yet to seal a $24 million deal with Hong Kong-based company New World Developments for Caves Beach, work on the resort will not begin this month. But Mr Gordon says the project is not in jeopardy.
Having regard to the current economic climate in Australia, the fact that we're still in a position to introduce offshore partners with $24 million worth of equity, I think is quite an achievement.
Lake Macquarie Mayor Doug Carley is confident the development will still go ahead, but he says the development application for the first part of the project, a golf course, expires in March.
If, however, that they don't proceed with that development application, it will mean that Gordon Pacific will have to reapply for the zoning.
Mr Gordon says the development application won't lapse.
Conscious of the fact that the first development approval expires in March, and the people of Lake Macquarie can be conscious and be confident that that work would be commenced and then other work would follow later on.
Scott Bevan, NBN News.
hang on to your hats, ladies and gentlemen, as we...
The starter had 3 goes at getting the field away, but the intensity of the racing led to the inevitable problems. Later, after spinning off the track, Kinser was relegated to the rear of the field on a race technicality, and he had plenty of work in front of him. But the world champ revelled under the pressure, catching Aussie title holder Max Dumsney and former champ Gary Rush. It was then a race between Tatnall and Kinser, but the American came through to take the checkered flag.
Sunday's away match against Apia Leichhardt is crucial for the Breakers, who have been winless since last November. A far-reaching search was made for suitable strikers. Dutchman Pierre Esses arrived and in his first appearance was struck down with a calf muscle injury. It's taking time to heal and the new recruit is resigned to working on his fitness, which he is attacking with gusto. And there will be plenty of Breakers players ready to even the score against Apia, who won the Newcastle clash after some rugged play. Ian Heddle, the recipient of a coming together with John Macquarie. Giving the Breakers extra resolve for a win is the announcement that captain Andy Kosker and goalkeeper Mike Gibson will play for their state against the Olympic squad, which ironically will be captained by their Breakers teammate Dominic Longo. Longo has had some injury problems of his own, but is now fully fit and hopeful of guiding the young squad to Barcelona. All will be on show when the Breakers meet the Socceroos at Birmingham Gardens next Wednesday night.
Ian Islob is probably better known to most people in Moree as the town's police sergeant. But in Australia's sporting circles, he's fast gaining a reputation as one of our best archers. In just 5.5 years, he's attained one of archery's highest honours, the Grand Master Award, and he says it's taken a lot of hard work.
We go away to different shoots, and to get a Grand Master you have to shoot 700 or better 3 consecutive times. After 5.5 years I've finally made it and I'm very pleased with it.
In 5.5 years, Ian also helped found the Guida Valley Archers in the mid-1980s, helping attract the club's 40 members. The club's popularity is still growing, with regular shoots each Sunday. Ian says archery is a great sport for all ages.
It's a really family sport and it's quite easily done with the young ones. We find that they're shooting really well here.
Charlie Brothers Vineyard might be new, but the area has a rich winemaking history.
Back in the 1840s, Major Innes on this property had 3 different plantings. Wines were distributed and exhibited in France and in other parts of the world and won acclaim. In the 1880s there were 32 vineyards in Port Macquarie and the industry died out.
It began again in the 1980s with the Cassegrain family's vineyard. Encouraged by their success, the Charlies planted their first vines in 1988. The winery's first offering is now available.
This year, that's the 1991 vintage, we've bottled a Semillon, a Chardonnay and a Pinot Noir. Next year we'll also be bottling a Cabernet Sauvignon and a Shiraz. So we'll have 5 varieties at least. We may have some more because we've planted some other varieties as well.
The wines are being distributed through restaurants and liquor outlets in Port Macquarie. The winery is part of a larger development, the $500 million Innes Lake complex. Covering more than 1,000 hectares, Innes Lake will include 3,000 residential blocks, a golf course, country club and shopping centre.
After an exhilarating midnight dash from Sydney, tired crews took the opportunity to rest up in Newcastle Harbour. After setting out from the southern port of Eden last Saturday, they've rock-hopped their way along the coast to Ulladulla, Kiama, Wollongong and Sydney. The boats made record time in last night's leg to Newcastle with strong following winds and swells.
I think that it's one of those nights where you've got excitement tinged with fear, and that's about the best thing that happens in ocean racing.
The duel is an attempt to establish ocean racing as a spectator sport, with the boats making short coastal hops and calling in at as many ports as possible. Inshore exhibition races will be sailed between legs. The Beneteau 375 yachts are evenly matched. Calligraphy is sailed by a Navy crew, while Bushranger City of Sydney boasts 6 of Australia's best blue water yachties.
A lot of the ocean racing that goes on at the moment have got different types of boats, and therefore the biggest and most expensive boat tends to come first over the line, and then you have a handicapping system which is arbitrary. In this racing, where all the boats are the same, it really is up to the skill of the crew.
With the civilians just ahead on points, the boats went tack for tack over an exhibition course off Newcastle this afternoon. The outcome was another warning shot over the bows of the Navy, with City of Sydney holding an 8-minute lead. The yachts leave Newcastle tomorrow, heading for Port Stephens, then on to Coffs Harbour on Monday. The series winds up in Brisbane a week from now.
The body, thought to be Stephen Jeffrey Finance, was sighted off the bogey hole around 3 this afternoon. Surf lifesavers tried to retrieve it near the rock ledge, but in doing so risked their own lives in the choppy swell. The men lost their rubber ducky boat and were in turn rescued by the police launch. Teams have been searching for the boy's body for the last 3 days, but with no luck. Late tonight, rescuers were still trying in the testing conditions. Peter Ryan, NBN News.
The start couldn't have been better for the BHP Breakers, the captain scoring an absolute ripper. "11 minutes later and Peter Bennett struck a telling blow. In the second half, Apia played aggressive football, but their second was full of luck. John Gibson was instrumental in many raids and was rewarded after receiving a great ball from Ulleran Shaw for number 3. Final score, Apia Leichhardt 3, BHP Breakers 1.
The air Novocastrians breathe simply stinks. That's the opinion of Dr Diana Day.
I think we need to be more inventive about how we look at air quality problems in the city. There's a lot of fallout from industry, and it's from a range of industries. And I want to see us be less complacent about what's in it and how frequently it turns up.
Dr Day says there's a massive air quality data to prove her point. However, she believes the sampling of pollution should be more widespread. Dr Day has welcomed the announcement that there will be a second air pollution summit in Newcastle.
We've got to get away from the fact that fringe people will come in and scream about the air quality in their kitchen sink, and that industry will come along and say something and leave. I think we've got to have them talking a little bit more fruitfully.
If the state government gets its way, the rail link through to Newcastle will be terminated at Civic Station. But a $37,000 survey by the Hunter Valley Research Foundation has found ratepayers disagree.
Our survey indicates that 54% of the respondents feel that the railway should not be closed, and a further 39% indicated that they would be in favour of the railway line closing at Civic.
The survey of 800 residents recorded their views on how the city should be governed. Lord Mayor John McNaughton accepts that some want the link to be maintained, but says it may be impossible with the upgrade of the foreshore and city centre.
A very high percentage said they wanted the CBD linked with the foreshore in order to revitalise the city. Now, those two things are a little bit at odds with one another, and we've got to come to terms with that.
Presented to Council last night, the survey also calls for a greening of the city. 88% said industrial pollution was an issue and called on Council to monitor the problem. But there was also calls for more growth in the industrial sector ahead of tourism, sporting and building industries. In the area of council services, the survey has given Newcastle a gold star. Of more than 30 service areas, all were regarded as at least satisfactory. Dog control, roads and public toilets were at the bottom of the list. About a third of those surveyed said Newcastle was changing for the better. Only 23% said things were getting worse. Peter Ryan, NBN News.
Late last year, NBN News revealed that the Stony Pinch Reservoir was leaking millions of litres every week during the height of drought water restrictions. The revelation embarrassed the Water Board, which was running an advertising campaign on the theme "Every Drop Counts." Today, the newly corporatised Hunter Water Board's first directors' meeting revealed their long-held suspicion that open-cut mining at the Bloomfield Colliery beside the Stony Creek Reservoir had seriously weakened the structure.
The damage to the reservoir over the last 18 months is such that it clearly indicates that it comes from ground movement, and we've had to take action by writing to the coal company involved and clearly spelling out that we'll have to take very serious actions if we can't come to some sort of arrangements.
The reservoir is now only capable of holding 20% of its capacity, a dangerously low level should the coalfields area suddenly increase demand for emergencies such as bushfire fighting. Even if the Bloomfield Colliery desists from further blasting, the Stony Creek Reservoir's days are numbered. The Water Corporation believes it may have no choice but to build a new reservoir in the next 5 years.
Between $2 and $5 million are the sort of numbers we're talking about.
Ironically, the same mining company that allegedly created the problem may be asked to help out. The Water Corporation believes there are seams of high-quality coal lying beneath the Stony Pinch site. They need a new reservoir and Bloomfields needs coal, so it could be a case of let's make a deal.
Well, we think there is some coal reserves under the old reservoir, and we might be able to do some negotiations along those lines where we make those available, provided we can get a new storage.
A spokesman for Bloomfield said the offer had been received, but the company's opinion was that the coal reserves beneath the reservoir were low grade and not worth mining. However, further talks are expected. Tom Hilston, NBN News.
The Australian Coal Industry Council, of which Mr Crean is chairman, has released a report which predicts coal exports from Australia will increase by 80% by the year 2000. In monetary terms, that's an estimated $12 billion in coal sales overseas. The report by consultants Barlow Yonker says the expected surge in demand will primarily come from power generation, and Australia is well placed to take advantage of this. But there are other countries also vying for these markets, and if Australia is to succeed, investment needs to take place to the tune of $5 billion. According to Meredith Helikar, Director of the New South Wales Coal Association, the Hunter Valley supplies around a quarter of the country's export coal and would soak up much of this capital injection. But changes do need to be made.
There is a tremendous opportunity if we get the competitive settings right. That means we need to continue with our work on lowering costs, improving productivity and efficiency within the mines, lowering rail freight rates to make them competitive.
Dr Helikar says the association has been calling for substantial investment for a long time now, and it is encouraging to see the government is finally on the same side.
I'm pleased that the government recognises that we are the most important and largest export industry in this country, and that the opportunity is there, and that work needs to be done by them as well as us to make sure we don't let this opportunity slip.
Along Shamrock Hill Lane near Green Hills, 100 hectares of Crown land has been turned into a tip.
Well, we describe this as just a disgrace to people. It's something that we feel as citizens in Maitland we ought to do something about.
Taking no chances with liability, Maitland City Council workers have marked scores of cars to be scrapped and given 5 weeks' notice.
This is the opportunity for anybody out here who believes that they want to recover their vehicle, or somebody who believes that the vehicle was taken from them and dumped out here. It's your opportunity to claim the vehicle and remove it yourself.
Part of the annual Clean Up Australia campaign on March 1st, the local four-wheel drive club has offered to tow the dumped cars to a central spot where a portable car crusher will break down the vehicles. Last year, the Maitland Clean-Up campaign attracted 500 local citizens. This year, organisers are expecting more than 1,000, working not just on major jobs like the car dumps, but also on simple projects like cleaning the park next door.
Gary McPhee led the competition for the all-round cowboy title all week after turning in good performances in all events. As well, McPhee is one of Australia's best team ropers. He and Tamworth cowboy Dave Hallam took out the Australian title. Steve Thorne continued to dominate the bull ride last night and has taken the Australian Championship. Shane Kenny won the rope and tie title, while Terry Noonan was victorious in the steer wrestling. Troy Dunn is now the Australian champion in the bareback event, and Kevin Cooper in the saddle bronc. Terry Lillerman from Northern Queensland won the all-round cowgirl title.
Signs of Australia Day nearing are popping up throughout the region. Today, Newcastle City Council prepared for its first formal event, an Australia Day dinner this evening. On the foreshore, while some got a preview of things to come, others were busy gearing up for what's now one of Australia's largest annual maritime regattas. 70,000 turned out last year, but with added attractions this time round, the organisers are tipping a crowd 3 times that number. New attractions include canoe polo championships and special guest Don McIntyre, better known for creating Australian history last year with his second placing in the Around the World Lone Yacht Race. The approach is something for everyone.
With Australia Day, firstly, it's a family day for all Australians. What we're trying to do is build national pride, and it's very, very important that we involve children in every aspect of that.
And that family theme will be promoted right throughout the entire region via some traditional and novel activities. These include the Harbour Regatta here in Newcastle, some thong throwing in Port Stephens and historical site tours in Singleton. For most towns throughout the Hunter, the official Australia Day ceremony will be held on Sunday. Catherine Lamond, NBN News.
At University number 2, 45 Newcastle youngsters played a mini test match on the last day of a week-long camp under the watchful eye of former test batsman Ashley Woodcock and former state player Mark Curry, who has just captained New South Wales to a win in the Australian Country Championships while making 3 centuries during the carnival. Every facet of the game of cricket was covered, an important part of any junior's development.
It's good to have a bit of coaching when you're young, so you get the fundamentals of the game, and these guys, of course, are the future of the game, so it's terrific. Good opportunity for them.
At Maitland, superstar Steve Waugh was handing out some timely tips, and after this last Monday night, catching was a priority. Steve acknowledges the wealth of talent in the country that needs nurturing, and the young players only need to take a look at who has succeeded from the regional areas to believe that a career at senior levels can be achieved.
Guys like Greg Geese and Greg Arms and Mark Curry and these blokes playing up in Newcastle are very good players. So it is hard for those guys to make the states from here, so I suppose they've got to go down the city like Tony has and chance their arm, but as you say, there's a lot of good players up here.
Formula One powerboats will reach speeds in excess of 200 kilometres per hour, pushing plumes of water metres into the air as they race around the triangular course of Newcastle Harbour in front of 50,000 spectators. Last year's winner Bob Halliday will again be the one to beat, although strong competition will come from former world barefoot water skiing champion Brett Wing, who was in his debut season in the flying machines. Others in the hunt will be Kay Marshall, Bob Love, Neil Hancock and a host of other leadfoots, including South Australian brothers Gary and Steve Griffiths. To a more sedate pace, and the annual Lake Macquarie Amateur Golf Championship has again attracted an international field, including Gary Woolstonholme from England and golfers from New Zealand, the United States and all states of Australia.
I think most of the guys out there think this is probably the biggest stroke tournament in Australia. There's others like Riversdale, but this has got the recognition and the quality of fields to be the best stroke tournament in Australia.
And the course itself is in excellent nick for the 4-round tournament.
The course is in the best condition I think that I've seen it in the last 3 or 4 years. The rain that we had over Christmas has really just brought it right up to as good as I've seen it for quite some time.
Some of the best tennis talent in New South Wales will attempt to win the time-honoured Newcastle Open, with Peter Doohan, a runner-up in Ballina 2 weeks back, home to regain the title of Open champion.
Number 1 seed's Jason Karsk, who's coming back to try his luck again, and Peter Doohan at 2, and Stephen Gleeson, a former AIS student, at number 3.
It is surprising to see Doohan at number 2 seed, especially since Richard Nichols won the recent AMP Classic in Newcastle. And the Australian Country Water Polo Championships will be conducted this long weekend at the Lambton Pool in Newcastle. It is the largest water polo tournament in the Southern Hemisphere, and many national representatives and a couple of overseas guest players will strut their stuff. The finals are on Monday. Finally, the sprint cars make a return to Tomago with American Joe Gertie the star attraction. Gertie was third behind Steve Kinser in the last World Sprint Car Championship and is a real goer.